Hi, this is Robin. Today I'm running Super Mario Bros. 64. That was just released for the Commodore 64. I'm running it on my Commodore 128D in C64 mode. I have my Super CPU plugged in. I'll show you more about that later. But let's just get right into the game. Got my joystick plugged into port 2. And there it is. This is running on the C128. You can see using the joystick, push up to jump, which is pretty typical on Commodore 64 games. And you can press the fire button to shoot, and also to run. It's a little funny playing with the joystick. Used to playing with a D-pad. This really works pretty good. Okay, this is the Super CPU Accelerator for the Commodore 64. This is the C64 version. I bought this around 1996 from CMD. At the time it was $200. Since then the prices have gone up a lot. You can see it's just a supersized cartridge. Here's a more typical cartridge size. And here's the Super CPU. On the top it has a switch to enable or disable it, a switch for Jiffy DOS, it's built into it, and it's also got a speed switch. It's in turbo mode. It'll also work in normal 1 megahertz mode. Turbo is 20 megahertz, and there's a turbo light and a reset button on the top of it. That's really all there is to it. On the back side it just has a pass-through port that you can plug other things into. And that's really it. So I'll just plug that into the back of the C128 here and turn it on. That's the introduction screen for it. And we'll go ahead and load it. Okay, and this is the boot up screen for Super Mario 64. You can see here that's detected my CMD SuperCPU. I'm running on a NTSC computer. It recommends that we run at 60 frames per second. And this menu here, we can go with the recommended play, or we can force 60 frames per second, or we can force the PAL 50 frames a second. Now that's actually advantageous on a lower spec machine. If you just have a stock C64 or 128, you may want to run at 50 frames per second, as it's easier for the computer to keep up with the Super CPU. Of course, we'd rather run at 60 frames per second. You can turn off the turbo. In this case, it's the Super CPU. It also supports other forms of acceleration, including the 2 MHz mode built into the Commodore 128, which can't be enabled all the time, but it can be switched on every vertical blank, that is the bottom and top of the screen that isn't part of the display. It can switch to 2 MHz, and you get an effective speed of maybe 1.2 MHz, which makes a difference. If you have more than one SID, you can enable that here at different addresses, but I don't. You can test that, and you can just look at the background art there. Okay, we'll go ahead and play that. It's just unpacking the game now. Based on the options you chose, you actually have to reload the game if you want to start any of those options again. Oh, here we go. Demo mode. This is pretty much a perfect port of Super Mario Bros. From the NES to the C64. Because they share the same processor, it's actually able to run most of the same code except for the sound and the video, which is significant, but he's done an amazing job here. Okay, and we'll try it on my stock 128 with just the Super Snapshot cartridge. And here's the disk directory. Super Mario Bros. See the nice Petsky Mario here. Let's load up the instruction file. And here's the manual. Okay, we can navigate through it. It's 40 pages. So you see here, this was by Zeropaige, and he started on this port back in 2012, and it just got released now in April 2019. He did a really amazing job, and it's incredible. So you see it's a port from the 1985 game Super Mario Bros. It supports various CPU improvements, turbo functionalities as he calls them, and supports having 2 SIDs. Now this game uses VSP, which is the same trick that Mayhem and Monsterland used to do fast, full screen, colorful scrolling. VSP can potentially crash your computer. This 128D seems completely stable with it, but there are C64s and I guess 128s that the VSP technique doesn't work for. VSP is a technique that fools the VIC chip into scrolling the screen, but it's not stable on all machines. And it also has a couple other drawbacks, which obviously Zeropaige here has managed to work around very well. Okay, and it talks about how you can run either the original Japanese or US release, which runs at 60 Hz NTSC, or the European release, which runs at 50 Hz. Now, because the NES does have a faster processor than the C64, on a stock C64, this game doesn't run perfectly. It does slow down when there's more objects on the screen at once. The C64 is doing an excellent job of simulating or emulating the sound chip of the NES, but if you have any kind of turbo functionality, such as what the Commodore 128 has, a C64 DTV, or a number of other rare accelerators, I have the Super CPU, then it will run better or pretty much perfect, depending on how much extra speed you have. And also here's the details about the SID support. I'm just going to flip through these screens quickly, but go ahead and Just pause the video and read it for yourself if you want to. Also, push up to jump and the button to run or fire if you've picked up the flower. If you happen to have a gamepad, it supports different options so that you can play it basically exactly like the NES controller. Mapping schemes. There's the keyboard options. Some thanks to Doppelganger, who did a disassembly of the original NES Super Mario Bros. And that was used in making this C64 version. Mr. Sid, who's an amazing Commodore 64 programmer. And here's the instruction booklet from the original NES version. I will flip through those very quickly. Again, just pause it if you want to read any of this. So you did a nice job of showing the graphics here. Okay, we'll reset the computer. I'll load it on my stock 128 here. And you see here it's detected I have an NTSC Commodore 128. It's suggesting that we run at 60 frames per second. And it's going to use that 2 megahertz mode to speed up the game a bit. And we'll go ahead and run it. Depacking. And here we go. Which one of these warp pipes can I go into? There it is. Oh! It's a pretty incredible job with the sound emulation too. There's a bit of slowdown there when it's doing some of the extra, I'm hesitant to call them particle effects, but it's possible to grab that. I thought I did once before. There's a bit of slowdown again there. But, whoops. Given that the NES does have a faster processor, and the game was written with the NES strengths in mind, this really is an incredible job. I don't think there's anything to complain about. And if you complain, well, I haven't gone to World 3 on this before. Whoops. So that's Super Mario Bros. 64 for the Commodore 64, and I was running on my 128D today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe. I've got lots of other videos in the works. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.